Thanks for having me out. My name is Arellano, if you want to get fancy with it and roll your R's. I am running for state representative in the 90th district, like I mentioned earlier. That, again, comes into Dekalb, central and southern Dekalb, along 88, and beneath that, Sandwich, Chavanagh, areas like that. I'm going to tell you a little bit myself briefly, but what I really want to talk about is the American dream, and especially the American dream versus dependency. I know we're running a little behind, so I won't too much of your time. I am a Dixon business owner. I own and operate a Jimmy John's franchise. I used to work for the corporate stores, and now I operate my own franchise as a small businessman. I'm also a sergeant in the United States Army Reserve. I've been in the Army Reserve since 2003, and I've done 2 combat tours, one in 2005, and then one in a leadership role in 2009 and 2010. I got back in May. That's my real brief background. Now I'd like to launch into the American dream, but in order to do that, I'll give you a little bit more about my personal story, my bio, and kind of where my family came from. My grandfather was a Mexican immigrant, came over a little after 1900, I want to say 1908, my records are a little spotty there, and he eventually became a pastor. He was not at all religious in his younger years, but eventually became a pastor. My mother's side is from German Catholic farmer country in Wisconsin. So the one side of my family has come from a farmer's background. The other side, immigrants, field workers, eventually got into the ministry. My father is also a minister. He's the pastor of Faith Assembly of Grandy Tour in Oval, which is where I grew up. I grew up in the Grandy Tour. I graduated from Faith Christian School. I went to a private school. I never went to public school my entire life until I went to the University of Michigan after I graduated. So when we were growing up, there's one story that always kind of stuck with me. And we were Republicans. We were growing up. I wasn't very political minded when I was younger, obviously. I didn't get really politically active until after my first tour, and especially after I became a business owner and saw firsthand some of the things that go on when you try to operate a business. But one of the things that always kind of stuck with me was my father told me about my grandfather and how poor they were growing up and some of the things they tried to do. And they had these people who came to him and they said, we're from the government. We can give you this free roof, help you rebuild your house, all these different programs. I can't name what the programs would be. That was well before my time. But my grandfather turned them away. My grandfather was dirt poor. The whole family was dirt poor. But he said, go give it to somebody who needs it. And that always struck with me, the kind of work ethic that he had. He went out, worked his butt off, and he never was a very rich man. Basically, Social Security was his retirement. But he installed in my father and me a sense of work ethic, a sense that we're not going to be dependent on anyone. We're going to empower ourselves. And by doing that, and translating it down, my father got his college degree. A lot of my relatives were factory workers, agriculture workers, things like that. But what was passed down to us was that we could be more than that. This American dream that you hear so much about, we could seize more than that. And that's one thing I really did. I started working when I was 12, did lawn mowings, things like that, became a newspaper boy. Did that until I was about 15 when I first got into food services, which, as I mentioned, I'm still in. Started out at the bottom end of the totem pole. I was a dishwasher, eventually graduated to the grease pit, worked my way up from there, and started saving up for college, working multiple jobs. I usually worked about 2 to 3 jobs at a time, only a few hours a week. In any given job, I was also in sports and then some of those other things. But I really got work ethic hammered into me by my family, and the idea that you're going to provide for yourself. I had 5 younger brothers. I was the oldest, had a huge sense of responsibility for that sort of thing. I was saving up my own way. I started paying my own way through college when I went to the University of Michigan. I almost joined the Army right out, both for the college benefits and because I grew up a John Wayne fan, military, wanted to do all those gung-ho things. I was a little naive as to what you actually do when you got in the military. But I didn't. I decided to go to the University of Michigan. By that time, when I got there, I started managing in restaurants. I managed for the University of Michigan snack bars and moved on to some other management jobs from there. So I was going to school part-time. I was managing part-time, paid my own way through trying to make sure none of my younger brothers had to lose money for the things that my parents provided for them. I very much wanted to support myself. My life changed a little bit after 9/11. That kind of flipped me back into my military mind in terms of service and duty and repaying the gifts that my country has given to me and the opportunities that I had gotten. So I decided after 9/11 that I was actually going to join the military, and I did in 2003, as I said, in April, as we were gearing up for war with Iraq. I joined the Army Reserve, came back, was going to school part-time, doing my military thing, and still managing. By that time I was with Jimmy John's. I joined their corporate offices in 2004 as an assistant manager. In 2005 I did my first tour. That was very much a life-changing experience. I won't go into details, but I came back a little bit different, knowing a little bit more myself and probably a little bit more about humanity. Stayed in management. I had, ever since I was younger, wanted to go into business for myself. So when I got an opportunity through the corporate stores to open up mine, I jumped on that. I came back home, back to the Dixon area, Dixon Gray Tour, where I grew up. That's also where my wife is from. She's actually my high school sweetheart. So we've been married a little over 6 years. So her parents were there, my parents were there. We came back home to start up a business. That was in 2007. It opened in 2008. And as many of you know, the recession dropped on us like a bomb a little bit after that, which I would have loved to know going in. But we did all right. I, in turn, followed my grandfather's example, worked my butt off, got my business to be successful even through the recession. And that's really what got me interested in politics, is seeing, as I was coming up, so many members of my family and so many members of, I guess you'd say, my social circles, as they were kind of falling by the wayside. It's getting harder and harder to grab this American dream. A lot of the things that I had to give up, you shouldn't necessarily have to give up to be successful. America is the land of opportunity. It's not the land of free handouts and all these other things that we all know aren't free at all. It's the land of opportunity. You should have access to an opportunity, but it's on you from there to seize it, to grab it, and to work for it. And I think I'm living proof that you can still do that. But I'm also not blind to the fact that it's becoming harder and harder. The regulations and hoops that I had to jump through to open my business are ridiculous. They were very eye-opening. And watching some of the other businesses in the Dixon area fail was also very eye-opening. They've lost probably close to 1,000 jobs. Some of them manufacturing jobs, 100 at a time. Some of them small business owners like me. One of my own direct competitors, a sandwich shop, failed in the past, about a little over a year ago. You're kind of on the front edge of that as a business owner. You're really in tune with what the economy is doing, what people are doing. When people are coming in purchasing, factories are coming in purchasing and then let it die down, you follow that front line. It's everything from your bottom line to the conversations you're having with your neighbors and to your regular customers. A great example is one of my customers who worked at Rainer, which does garage doors right there in Dixon. Came all the time, probably 2 to 3 times a week. And if you've worked at all in food services, you know that your steady customers are where you make your money. You're going to get random people coming through, maybe 20-25% of your business. But your regular customers are really who keep your business open, and they're really the people you got to take care of. And you get to know them and talk to them. And all of a sudden, he stopped coming. And he showed up, I don't know, probably a month or 2 later and got a random sandwich. I asked what happened. Well, Rainer had cut their entire 3rd shift. They cut half of their 2nd shift down. He didn't have a job anymore. He was working part-time for some local farmers. And just recently, he started coming back again steadily. And I asked him what happened. Well, Rainer started hiring back, and he's on the line. I said, that's great. He said, they're not hiring necessarily more people. They don't have more shifts. But through attrition, he'd come back up on the lottery that they had, and he was able to get his job back. And those are the kind of things that I've seen firsthand as a business owner in the community. And those are the really things that get to me and frustrate me in terms of where our economy is at, where our country is at, where Illinois is at, and the kind of policies that we fight for. I think too often we're sold this idea that we need to go get handouts a little bit strong, but that we need to go get help, that we need to rely on government or other people, and we're losing our ability to take care of ourselves. We're losing our ability to provide for ourselves. We're losing our ability to retire for ourselves. I saw that with my grandparents firsthand. By the time they were done, they were completely relying on Social Security because nobody really taught them or trained them or sat them down and said, this is how you plan for retirement. This is how much you need to store. And maybe they didn't have as much opportunities as I have had, as my father had, because they were very poor. But nobody ever had that conversation with them. They never even made it through high school. So these are very basic things that we're losing in our country. Our ability to provide for ourselves. Our ability to make choices and say, you go give that free roof to somebody else, I'm going to provide my own family. And by doing that, he set an example for our own family, which is why I'm here. There are a number of my relatives that are not nearly as successful as my side of the family. And I'm not going to point names or justify everything or any of those kind of things, but one of the things I've consistently seen in my life is that people who are proactively taking care of themselves and relying on themselves and challenging themselves to provide consistently do better. And I see far too many people get caught in this trap of dependency, and they end up getting to their children and moving on. I know people who have been on welfare for 3 generations. 3 generations where they've never pulled it up. Whereas my side of the family, my grandfather was an immigrant. Within 3 generations, we're a business owner. One of my brothers goes to Cornell. Another brother's an Army officer in Germany. Another one of my brothers is going to be a physician's assistant. He's going to NIU, finishing his degree right now. Just dramatically different. And there's some things that government can do nothing about. Government can't give you parents who love each other and take care of you. That's something that is simply not in the realm of government to be able to. And even if I won, I couldn't provide that kind of support to anybody. And that is a huge part. That's one of the things we need to do as a community. We need to do as church bodies, as friends, as relatives. But that gets me to the end of my speech. I'm taking a little bit longer than I planned. But that's what can a legislator do?
I was about to get to vote.
What can a legislator do? What could I do if I was elected? One of the biggest things we can do is set an environment where businesses can succeed, where people can provide for themselves. Where instead of paying X amount in this and property taxes, and I could go into a long rant spiel about taxes and how much they prevent me from expanding or hiring. All these politicians you hear saying, we need jobs. And then they vote for policies that absolutely do not help me as an employer or any of the other employers I know hire. Absolutely prevent and crush down our ability to do that. The biggest thing I would talk about is our debt and how much it affects what we can spend, how much we're paying just in interest as a state, and how much the federal government is paying just in interest. And whether you're Democrat or Republican, you can think of a ton of things better to do with the roughly $400 billion that the federal government spends in interest. Illinois, I forget the exact number, our debt comes to roughly about $10,000 a person, just a hair under that. But whether you're Republican or Democrat, you can think of better things to do. If you're Democrat, maybe you are going to go into the school system. If you're Republican, like me, you'd want to go into tax relief so we can start hiring again, so we can turn the economy over. And so we can take people who are on unemployment or on welfare or getting help to raise their kids and get them back to work. So not only are they not taking that money from the taxpayers, but they're also paying back in and are on a path of success for themselves, a path that I followed. And that's really why I want to get into public service. My service as a soldier allowed me to repay my debt to my country and some of the opportunities I have. And now I want to go down to Springfield and make sure that path, that ability to follow the American dream and rely on yourself and raise your own family up is still safe for my children, for my daughter, and for the next generation. And even for my generation that have been struggling, trying to succeed, getting out of college, not being able to find jobs because our economy is just being crushed by bad policy. So I won't go into too many details. I'll be around to answer questions afterwards, but I know we're a little dying, so I'll stay.
Well, actually, we're going to have some Q&A now.
I'll do it right now. That's
I
fine.
believe in putting these guys in a spot. Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? Because no hold bars here. Let's go here. Ted?
Yeah, I just wanted
Short
to...
Reader's Digest condensed
I
version,
know.
please.
Okay, you had tons of time. This is my first words today. Okay, basically I did want to say that I admire your story, and unfortunately I have some relatives out west that are the exact opposite of you. I just want to tell you there's a 3rd generation welfare relative out west who is right now, does nothing but a young man trying to smoke marijuana all day, and he's trying to get his girlfriend pregnant so they could collect the welfare. He's encouraging her. Luckily, she's not going along with this.
This is questions for him.
I know, but I'm stating that the opposite of what him, an example, the opposite of this gentleman. What my main question I wanted to ask you, since you're out of my district and I'm not as familiar with your candidacy, what is the main difference between you and your Republican primary opponent or opponents?
Well, there's 4 of us in the race. There, I believe, 1 more getting into the race. The biggest difference for me is I'm not at all a politician. I volunteered with political campaigns. I usually pick 1 candidate per cycle that I really believe in and I'll fight for him. But I've never held elected office, and I don't right now. And everybody else in the race is. They're all on various functions. Some of them have been in it for years and years. I'm coming in it with experience as a business owner, as an employer, and I'm going down to Springfield to take my knowledge, having actually produced jobs during a recession, and fighting for policy that would help support getting Illinois out of the economy it's in. I'm not going in as an elected official with some of the things I go in. I think that's my biggest difference. I also the only one with a military background and leadership experience with that. But we each bring different things to the table, different resumes. I think my strongest focal point is that I have experienced the business climate that all these politicians like to talk to. I experienced it firsthand as an employer in the middle of it. And that's the knowledge I'll be taking to Springfield.
One more question. Thank you.
Do you believe that we should start bringing the troops home from not only Iraq and Afghanistan, but also the 142 other places they're stationed around the world?
That's a very complex question, a little out of the state legislative. I'll give you a real brief answer. I do think we're in far too many countries. Our troops are stationed in far too many countries. They don't necessarily need to be. Some of my military buddies have been stationed in places all over the world where we haven't had a conflict in forever. And while we may or may not need bases around the world to be able to respond, we definitely have far too many at far too huge a cost. And being a member of the Defense Department and the Army, I've seen firsthand how fast they can waste money. It's very, very impressive how fast they can waste money. And wherever there's going to be a military base, there's going to be a bunch of contractor leeches basically stealing money from the government and stealing money from soldiers that probably we don't need near as many. So I wouldn't say we should draw down completely from anything, but we're definitely way too high. So.
Thank you. All right, Larry, thank you a lot, and maybe come back.
Hi, I'm Dan Proft, and I'm a talk show host for WLS AM 890 in Chicago, 9 to 11, Mondays through Fridays.
Dan here is from Wheaton, Illinois. I can make it there in 45 minutes. I don't know. Are you down there late, actually?
I am.
Oh, okay. You had a drive this morning to the scenic route, I bet.
Yes.
All the construction signs?
Yes, navigated.
Yeah.
Been the bombs at the wall.
Dan here's from Wheaton. He's got some information he wants to share with us. I have one question since I chaired the meeting.
Yeah.
How did you find out about us?
You know, I have lots of little birdies that fly around the state that let me know what people like you are up to. Just so we got to keep an eye on you, clearly.
My wife's given up on that, so I don't know why you're going to try and do it.
I'll try and avoid those keywords, too. I don't want to. But the one thing I would say, if this is only your third meeting, prediction, you're going to need a bigger room.
Yeah.
So that's a good problem to have. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning. Thank you very much.
You got about 20 minutes?
Okay, I'll try and...
No, we're still okay.
Keep it within the bounds of propriety. I was going to welcome you as Jimmy Hoffman Jr. would, but I think it's a little early in the morning for that kind of language, so I'll try and keep it G-rated. And by the way, I did notice the prop signs out front, so I want to thank whoever was able to dig up those artifacts. I think it was those signs that Severson pulled out of the ground to put Diller signs in. I'm pretty sure that's what they were. But no, it's great to be with you. The thing I want to talk a little bit about this morning is really the 2012 cycle, and I know there's frustration with both parties, particularly in this state. But the reality is, in 2012, there's going to be people running with an R next to their name and people running with a D next to their name. And how do we catch the wave that all of our Midwestern neighbors caught this last cycle that we did not? And that wave's, at the federal level, not bad. Whatever you think, new U.S. Senator hold of his congressional seat, 4 new congressmen, good congressmen. So that's, progress at the federal level. But at the state level, while Indiana and Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio and Minnesota were making great progress towards the mean in terms of in terms of Republican takeovers of their state legislatures or Republican takeovers of their gubernatorial mansions or both, Illinois missed the wave. So why is that, and what is the lesson to be learned from 2010 to be applied in 2012? Because I think the same opportunity that existed in 2010 here, as elsewhere, exists in 2012. If you've noticed, things are not improving terribly under Governor Quinn and the same Chicago Democrat leadership that has lorded over this state for the last decade. And by the way, there is a bit of good news about Chicago, right? Chicago right now, the smallest population since 1920. So shrinking. So that's good news. But of course, the people leaving are not named Madigan or Quinn, White, or Cullen, or Madigan. You kind of get the picture of what the problem is. So what is it that we're not doing that some of the other states have done an effective job of doing, that House Republicans at the federal level did an effective job of doing in 2010? And so earlier this summer, I'm reading a new book by David Mamet. David Mamet, most of you probably know, a great screenwriter, probably seen some of his movies, The Verdict with Paul Newman, Glengarry Glen Ross, Wicked Son, he writes the show, The Unit. So it actually started out as a Chicago cabbie, and then found he had a talent for writing and made his fortune in Hollywood. Well, so for the first 60 years of his life, Mamet was somebody who hewed the liberal Orthodox line in Hollywood. Just another liberal out there, part of the group thing on the left coast. But then a few years ago, that started to change, and it culminated with this book that he released last year called The Secret Knowledge, which chronicles his transformation, his journey from being an Orthodox liberal to being a conservative. And of course, the old saying about no one is more zealous than the converts. He is a zealous conservative now, and he pillories the Hollywood left. So it's a very entertaining read if you haven't picked it up yet. But the journey, Mamet's journey, I think is instructive for some of the lessons that we need to inculcate here as we look at 2012. Mamet's journey, real quickly. After Saturday service, he's talking to his rabbi in advance of the 2000 election. And he just says casually to his rabbi, says, so who are you going to vote for in November? Are you going to vote for Al Gore? And Mamet's rabbi says, no, actually, I'm not. And Mamet says, oh, really? You're going to vote for Nader then? Right, because the choices in 2000 were just Gore or Nader. And Mamet's rabbi says, no, actually, I'm not voting for Nader either. And Mamet was like, well, Gore, and there's Nader. Wait a second. You're going to vote for George W. Bush. And Mamet's rabbi said, yeah, actually, I'm a Republican. And of course, Mamet was gobsmacked, was immediately concerned for his rabbi's eternal salvation, and wanted to start getting him liberal scholarship because he couldn't understand how his rabbi had gone off the reservation and out into the wilderness. So Mamet says, can I send you some books? Can we talk about them? The rabbi said, of course, send me some books. So he sent him all the liberal tracts, What's Wrong with Kansas, and all the standard issue liberal screeds. And they talked about it. And then after those discussions, Mamet's rabbi said, now can I send you some books, David? And we can talk about those. And so Mamet said, sure, and that's what they did. And Mamet's rabbi sent him Witness by Whittaker Chambers and Road to Serfdom, Capitalism and Freedom, and Conflict of Visions by Thomas Sowell. And they talked about those. And slowly but surely, Mamet's view of the world started to change, culminating with this book that I referenced that he just released last year. And so what's the lesson in that? Well, one of the lessons, actually, his rabbi offers in terms of trying to explain why he thought Mamet would be open to conversion, open to seeing the world in a different way. And Mamet's rabbi said, what the left tries to do is squash people, make them one-dimensional. You are your income tax bracket, and that's all you are. And he said, he knew Mamet would reject any type of philosophy that explained the human condition where human beings were one-dimensional. Because Mamet is an artist, and he understands that people are multidimensional. People are textured. You're not just your income tax bracket. And so that was really an insight his rabbi had that turned out to be correct. The other important lesson, writ large for us, is that I think too often we think that everyone has heard the arguments. Everyone's heard all the arguments. They've read all the scholarship, and some people just choose to be statists. Some people just choose to embrace big government and command control economics. And in fact, here you have a guy who writes 7-figure screenplays for a living, very well read, very intellectually complicated and advanced, and he had never heard the arguments. He'd never been exposed to the scholarship. People haven't heard the arguments. Something to remember. And if you look at the 2010 cycle at the federal level, with what happened with the Republican takeover of the House, what you saw happen is the House Republicans, the Tea Party, largely led by the Tea Party, changed the conversation, and that started to change people's opinions, and that changed their behavior on Election Day, and that changed electoral outcomes, and now we have changing policy choices by the different people who were elected. It is a continuum. There is not going to be this collective epiphany where one day everybody in Cook County is going to wake up and say, oh my God, what have I been doing voting for Democrats all this time? They've destroyed the state. It needs to be a conversation along this continuum that culminates with a different decision on Election Day, different elected officials, different policy choices being made. So how do we change that conversation? Well, the first thing is, when the conversation turns around to you, best have something to say. And I think for a long time in this state, in particular, talking at the state level, the Republican Party has not had a lot to say when it turns to us to interject ourselves into that conversation, to try and change people's opinions and attitudes. And I think the struggle is we talk a lot in abstractions about policy, lower taxes, less regulation, small government. But we don't say explicitly who this is all on behalf of. I think we need to be very specific about defining a constituency and then speaking to that constituency, because the one thing the Chicago Democrats in the state are very good at, as they prove over and over again, not great at budget math, but they're very good at political math. They understand precisely who their constituency is, and they will serve that constituency with religious fervor. The state be damned. We have to finance the public sector unions. The state be damned. I'm going to do what the limousine liberals on the North Shore who fund our campaigns want me to do. They know who their constituency is. And their constituency, especially now as we kind of, the margin between producers and takers continues to close, their constituency gets them pretty close to 50% plus one. Then all they have to do is snooker a few unsuspecting people who are not paying attention up until the election day, and Mike Madigan is still your speaker, and Larry David is your governor. So, the constituency. Thinking about what's happening in the state, and it's very easy to describe reality, but that's not enough. And it's very easy to say Chicago Democrats have destroyed our state, but that's not enough either. Who is it that the Republican Party in this state is going to enter the arena on behalf of? Politics is a fight. It's not a fight in a physical sense, but it's a fight. We argue about things, we disagree with the other side, sometimes we disagree internally, because this is about how society should be ordered, how human interaction should be regulated. And the point actually is the fight. Even if you don't win, the point of existing, the point of being a patriot, is to put in the fight for those things that you believe. Constituencies. So you've noticed in the headlines, companies like Caterpillar, John Deere, Motorola Mobility, even the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, for God's sakes, are openly ruminating about looking for greener pastures to possibly locate their businesses. And they have come to the realization that Illinois may not be the most friendly place to do business. And they have leverage. When they speak, when Oberhelman at Caterpillar starts complaining in public about taxes, the newspapers and the media pay attention. And so does Governor Quinn. And so they respond. And when they say, we want relief from that corporate tax hike you just passed, Governor Quinn responds. Motorola, same thing. And they're going to get some relief from that tax increase. You know who's not going to get relief? There's another category of businesses. Lee is a good representative of them. Those are the businesses with less than 5 employees in this state that, when they go away, die unheralded deaths. Nobody pays attention. They don't have leverage. Governor Quinn will not respond when they complain about overregulation or high taxation. 1.2 million businesses in this state, less than 5 employees, comprise 90% of all business enterprises. These are the job producers and the wealth creators. And let me tell you something. I know as a party, and I'm not saying everybody's a Republican, I'm speaking extemporaneously. I know as a party we talk a lot about small business. But what are we doing in advance of these small businesses? For example, Nice Cream. It's a little artisanal ice cream maker in Chicago. Well, we had the entrepreneur who started this business on our show a couple weeks ago. This woman who actually was laid off from her job. Remember, she got this piece of equipment as a wedding present. She decided, I want to make ice cream. So she's, for the last 3 years, has been making ice cream. Ice cream is her business. Very popular, kind of cult following. This summer, she was going to get picked up by Whole Foods for Whole Foods to distribute her ice cream in 3 of their stores in Chicago. Pretty big step up. So that was going to be a capacity building experience for her. Always going to hire new people. And then one day, she got a visit from a regulator from the Illinois Department of Health, who had a checklist and said, wait a second, you don't have a pasteurizer with this $40,000 piece of equipment. And she said, I know, because we don't need one, and I can't afford it. And the response from the state was, but it's on my checklist, so you have to have it. And her response was, well, we test our ice cream in compliance with Illinois Department of Public Health standards, and our ice cream in terms of bacterial level is significantly lower than what is required by the state. And that's what this pasteurizer piece of equipment that you're mandating that I have is aimed to do. So actually I don't need it because I'm complying with state regulations, the spirit and purpose, which is to protect the public health. And people like my ice cream, and Whole Foods wants to shelve it, so no. And now she's out of business. In a state with 9.9% unemployment, in a state that has led the nation in job loss last month, led the nation in the number of people applying for unemployment insurance benefits this month, that's the attitude of state government. Where's the Republican Party to intercede on her behalf? It's not just about jawboning, I like small business. I'm for the entrepreneur. We need to make it explicit that we are for that universe of people, those 1.2 million business enterprises, and we need to act in accordance with what we say. Great market opportunity, politically speaking. Let me give you another example. Teachers unions and teachers. I spend a lot of time on my radio station, my radio show, excuse me, I wish it was my radio show. My radio show and just in everyday life, beating the tar out of the teachers unions because they deserve it, and I will continue to do that. But there's something else going on in education in the state, K through 12 level. 50% of teachers will leave the profession in their first 5 years. Now, I mean, everybody gets out of college and say, oh, I think I want to go to insurance, and you try out insurance for a year and you don't like it, so you want to go do something else, so you leave. That does not explain a 50% attrition rate in education. Jeffrey Canada, the founder of Harlem Children's Zone, a successful charter school operation in New York City, in Harlem actually, said, and you may have seen these on Amex commercials, a great teacher is like a great artist. I agree with him, and so should the Republican Party. You know who doesn't agree with him? Teachers unions. Because for them, a great teacher, same as a bad teacher, just another dues-paying teacher. But there's this 50% attrition rate. So you have to explain what's happening there, what the opportunity is, right? So the teachers unions will tell you, well, it's because the pay and benefits are subpar. That's not the case. Simply, statistically, it is not the case. And if you talk to teachers who've left the profession, what they'll actually tell you is, I am in systems, or a school system, that does not allow me, essentially, to be the great artist that I got into teaching to be. It does not allow me to do what I want to do as a teacher, which is instill a love of learning into children and set them on a path to be independent, successful adults. The systems won't allow me to do that, so frankly, it's not worth my time and energy. I'm going to go do something else. So we are suffering because we are losing good teachers. We are losing teachers that otherwise would enhance the quality of educational output in the state, which, by the way, is subpar, and not just in Chicago. Chicago may be one of the worst school systems in the Western Hemisphere, but there are a lot of schools in the suburbs and exurbs as well. People think are good school districts, and really they're mediocre school districts. And all you have to do is look at the collegiate level, whether it's community colleges or our state universities, and find out how much money is spent on remediation, even for the 1 in 3 college-bound high school seniors that make it to college. They are not prepared to do post-secondary work. That's an indication that K through 12 is not holding up its end of the bargain, particularly for the property taxes we all pay in particular. So the 50% of teachers who wanted to be great artists, but enter systems that don't allow them to find the fullest expression of their artistry. That's a potential constituency for the Republican Party. One more. Illinois happens to rank 51st out of 50.
Not 57?
It is not an Obama moment. I recognize that we're all making mistakes. 51st out of 50 in funding services for the developmentally disabled. We're behind Puerto Rico, that's all. Now, this is terribly perplexing to me, because as I understand it, the Democratic Party is the party of the social safety net. The Democrat Party is the party of serving truly vulnerable populations. The Democratic Party is the civilized party that is not going to let individuals who need assistance fall through the cracks. So somebody has to explain to me, if that's their party, those are the attributes of that party, then how is it, with the largest state deficit in the country proportionally, with $8 billion in unpaid bills, with a $7 billion tax hike passed in January, how is it, and also a decade of Chicago Democrat dominance, how is it that your stated priority of serving the vulnerable leaves us 51st out of 50 in funding services for what we all, I believe, would agree are truly vulnerable populations that should get assistance, that those families should get the help that they need to care for developmentally disabled persons in a civilized society. So how is that? What's the explanation? It's a conundrum. I guess what I've kind of figured out, what I've discerned, the reason for this seeming contradiction is that you see the Chicago Democrats are lying. They're just lying. They are not who they say they are, and they do not represent who they say they represent. But that market opportunity requires us to make an appeal directly to those families and to those social service providers, and there are great ones in every community in this state, to say that actually we are your party. And here's the difference between the two parties for the larger conversation of the electorate. We, as Republicans, as conservatives, believe we are our brother's keeper in the Christian sense of that phrase, in the ecumenical sense of that phrase. The Democrats want us to be our brother's sugar daddy, and that is the difference. It is a great teaching moment to provide contrast for the two parties and explain to people the difference, and to make sure that those truly vulnerable populations do get the services that they should get, and that we are going to be the providers of those services, because the Chicago Democrats have been lying to you, just as they lied to everyone else. One other one real quickly, because this just came up last week, at Wall Street Journal NBC poll, only 45% of self-identified union households approve of the president's job performance. The trades in the state, carpenters and plumbers and electricians and operating engineers, those locals are looking at 30 and 40% unemployment at their halls, right? They have now come to the realization, slow as it may have been, that Keynesian economics, not so great, not working out terribly well for them. And there are a lot of people at the rank and file level, just as we have rank and file teachers, just as we have rank and file small businesses, just as we have rank and file families who care for developmentally disabled children, that are getting hip to the reality that this system and the people that run it ain't working out so well for them. And if you think about all of those various constituent groups that I've touched on, they have something in common. They have all been treated like less than by a state government that they finance. Let me tell you something. The less thans in this state are way more than 50% plus one, because the more thans are very easy to identify. There are a handful of Chicago Democrats who live within a couple square miles of one another, down by me, and the public sector unions that finance them and that they return the favor for once they get elected. That's who state government is set up to serve right now. And so when we have this opportunity to look at the landscape and talk about all the numbers and tell people how bad Illinois is, yeah, I get it. But what people really want to understand is, what is it that you're going to do to manifestly address the very real quality of life concerns I have about a diminishing standard of living that is diminishing day after day after day in this state? How are you going to bring it back? How are you going to expand economic opportunity? And frankly, whose side are you on? Because it's not clear to a lot of people whose side everybody's on, even if you have an R next to your name. That needs to be stated explicitly. The policies that flow from us defining a constituency that we intend to serve need to be stated explicitly and repeatedly, and we need to go after the Chicago Democrats to expose how they have lied to so many people, how they have duped so many constituencies to bring them to the party and make the Republican Party, a conservative Republican Party, a governing Republican Party for generations to come. Because if we don't do that, then we are going to be in the same place in 2013 talking about how a lot of other states made progress against Democrats and public sector unions over the last couple years, and somehow at the state level we missed the boat again because we allowed the Chicago Democrats to tell people who we are and who we are for, as opposed to doing it ourselves. Thank you very much.
And
recommend to us, the DeKalb County people, what would that one thing do vis-a-vis Illinois?
Well, I mean, you're an opinion leader, you personally, as well as this organization. So you have more credibility within your circles of family, friends, neighbors, colleagues than I do, than Tom Cross or Chris Redonia or Pat Brady or any other Republican Party official does. You need to be an ambassador for our ideas, our story, our constituency. I mean, I know DeKalb isn't, downtown Chicago, so I know you're not the problem children, generally speaking, in terms of electing Democrats that go down and are roll call votes for Madigan and Cullerton. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to be ambassadors, because we need bigger numbers everywhere, including in DeKalb County, for our statewide elections. This is really a capacity building exercise in 2012, as much as I think there's an opportunity to take back the Illinois House, to take back the Illinois Senate, 6 seats in both, that's doable. But as much as I think that this is a capacity building exercise, not just for 12, but for 14 and beyond, when Quinn and Durbin are up in 14 and beyond. This is about putting together a long-term majority coalition in this state that believes in free markets and free minds. And that requires changing the conversation to change people's attitudes, just to keep people here, number one, the people that are producers that are looking around saying, Wisconsin looks a lot better, Indiana looks a lot better. I mean, and we kind of mau Illinois for all kinds of good reasons, but we really don't want people to leave, not good people. I'd like Madigan to leave, but he's not going to, because it's very good for him in Illinois. I want it to be bad for him and good for everybody else. But being ambassadors for our ideas, advancing the scholarship, just like David Mamet's rabbi did. I mean, that's such a powerful story, and it shows you what the opportunity is, but you have to be kind of willing to engage people. And I know not everybody likes to talk about politics, and nobody likes to be, get in confrontations with friends and family. But, at some point, you kind of have to hold the mirror up to people and ask them to be accountable for themselves, for their community, and for what's happening in the state. And being accountable means stop doing the same things you're doing. So to me, everybody can do this. Everybody can be an ambassador for our ideas and for defining our narrative so that people get it.
Ted, you're next.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to you on WLS, by the way, when you're on. So.
Thank you.
890, 911.
But no, wait. Oh, I was leaving. That was the intro.
I don't know what to do about your family over there with the son the one kid who smokes dope. And,
no. Distant family. Anyway, no, what happened is I'm when it came to that gubernatorial election you were in, I was very, very torn between you and Andrzejewski, because both of you guys were excellent. Kill the ringer. Okay, both of you guys were excellent candidates, and I felt like the rest of them were either rhinos or quasi-rhinos. You two were the top. Now, I missed the radio debate, but from what I understood, there was a question asked at the end, and keep in mind, I thought you and Andrzejewski were awesome, both of you.
in that order.
But I guess they asked Andrzejewski if somebody else were to win, if you had to vote for someone else and you weren't running, who would you vote for? He said Proft.
Right.
And then I thought you would say Andrzejewski, and instead you said Ryan, the quasi-rhino. Now,
that's right.
Why wouldn't you pick Andrzejewski, who's so much more conservative like you are?
Yeah, because, well, not to put too fine a point on it, but, I'll just say it directly, Jim Ryan, in my view, is the only other adult in the race. So, I disagree with Jim Ryan on all kinds of issues. In fact, I ran Pat O'Malley's campaign against Jim Ryan when he ran for governor in 2002. I was with O'Malley. So I understand the idea of the most electable conservative, the Bill Buckley rule, but I also understand that this is not a time for self-indulgent navel-gazers or sideshow acts. And Jim Ryan was the other adult in the race, in my view, at that time, in terms of how that campaign unfolded, and so that's why I said what I said.
Dan, I was wondering if, do you think that Illinois is just really following a model of the nation, which is becoming a feudalistic society and a two-class system? And if so, then how are you going to engage, for lack of a better term, the serfs to rise up against the Chicago Nine that you are against?
Right.
And more importantly, how are you going to get business owners to get on board, since most of them have almost thrown in the towel, especially in Illinois?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're right. You create dependency, then you have a loyal voting bloc, and that's the Chicago Democrat model. And I wouldn't say that Illinois is following the nation. I mean, we exported a Chicago Democrat to D.C., so what he's trying to do is have the nation follow Illinois, and he's doing a pretty damn good job of it, unfortunately. So, you know, the challenge in terms of, the takers and the makers, right, and that closing margin between the two. The good news is that there are still more makers than takers, even in Illinois. That's still true. And I understand the despondency of the small business owner, but that's where, again, I think that the appeal needs to be not just, we agree, taxes are outrageous, regulations are stifling, these guys in office are clowns, and on and on and on, denigrating Illinois and complaining about how things are. I think we need to kind of pivot and say, here's how things can be. And we need to be, I just keep going back to it, ambassadors. I mean, you know, words are the currency of politics. You have to have something to say. You have to explain things to people. You have to give them an idea and a vision and a narrative as to where you want to go, how you want to get there, and why. And I think that's really what we haven't done. I mean, I hate to boil it down into something so facile, but it really is telling the story that directly relates to people's quality of life concerns. I think we just kind of talk over and around people without talking to people and giving them something to grab onto, to say, okay, now I get that, and I want to be a part of that. And I think we can do this. I think, you know, we need to imbue some optimism into our friends and colleagues and small business owners that is not just boundless, unhinged optimism, but that's based on an idea that if we put the work in, if the makers organize and they're of one mind and purpose when it comes to changing the political leadership in this state starting in November 2012, then this is doable. This can be turned around. And what is more fun than being part of a story no one thinks can be told?
We need to definitely let the business people know where we stand. Let them know we're Tea Party people. We're tired of the D's and R's pointing the fingers at each other. You know, let's look at the problem and move on. You know, then the business people, you know, speak up. As people run for office, when you go to a business, you put up a sign, what do they say? You can't put up your sign. You know, I support you, I like you, but I don't want to offend anybody. Because they don't want to know that maybe they like you, but you may be a small subset of all the other people out there that are supported with somebody else that they support more. But we need to speak up in our communities, our groups, our friends, family circles, and let them know who we are and we're here.
And I'll tell you what, too, push them a little bit. I mean, I know, you know, I don't want to get people to do something they don't want to do, or, you know, put a sign in their window if they don't want it, they're going to get heat, or it's going to negatively impact their business. But, I mean, look, in Illinois, this is like Red Dawn time. You know, there are little paratroopers in the sky. So it's kind of, are we going to organize, and are we going to get prepared for the attack, or, you know, are we just going to say, well, you know, I don't want to offend anybody? I mean, people need to be pushed a little bit too. People use despondency sometimes as an excuse for inaction. So you know, you have currency with your friends and colleagues and neighbors and so forth that I don't have, that no Republican Party official has. Use it. Use it.
Don't let there be a CP by your name. Don't let there be a CP by your name. Back here in the back, we had a couple questions. Next.
I'm sorry.
Somebody, I think it was you, in the way back, lady, the red. Was that you? You had a question?
I did have a question, Robert, for my own edification. You talked about the Democrats being the ones that like to see what the political leaders should say, and the Republicans like to like to see all that, and I think this is now the case. However, would I be mistaken in thinking that you think that it's just the two views? Because I see a lot of problems within the Republican Party too, which is why I want to be here. I'm a conservative, always have been, always will be, you know, a raging conservative.
Yeah, with apologies to Ozzy Osbourne, those two little crazy trains. Yeah, no, look, I agree with you. I mean, one of the reasons that I decided to run for governor last cycle was I had gotten angry enough and fed up enough and mad at my money enough to decide to run to kind of be the change I wish to see in the world in a very Gandhi-esque way, which is about the only comparison that I would make to myself and Gandhi. But so I think that you're right that there is this struggle in Illinois, but there's also an opportunity because what happened to the Republican Party in Illinois was it was a top-down party, it was a corporatist party, it was the Jim Thompson, Jim Edgar, George Ryan show, and it was all about the same thing as the Democrats do, which is elections are about winning elections is about obtaining control over the spoils of war to distribute them to your friends. That was the model. That model, came crashing down on our side of the aisle with George Ryan's demise. And for the last decade, we've been kind of groping around in the dark trying to find a new model. And there's disagreement because there are remnants of the party that still like the Thompson, Edgar, Ryan model. And then there is the Tea Party and other conservatives, including conservative legislators. There's a lot of good legislators in the two caucuses that are conservatives that disagree with that model too. But I think we need to bring more talent to bear. We need to get more young guys like Lee running for office to imbue the caucuses with a new attitude, a new sensibility, a new sense of purpose. And like I said, it's not a light switch. It takes time to kind of unravel the mess that was the Illinois Republican Party. It would be nice if we win some statewide elections. I think, again, those missed opportunities last cycle were very damaging. But that push and pull between not just even moderate and conservative elements, but between kind of the corporatist model and the policy model, the idea that there's an understanding that all candidates are, all elected officials are, they are conduits for policy choices. So if I was elected on for promoting certain policy choices, and I made different policy choices when I got to Springfield, then I should be de-elected. Because that's all I am. I am just an emissary for the ideas that I run on, for the policy choices I say I'm going to make. And I think those are the two models that are at war within the Republican Party. At war is a little melodramatic. It's not at war. But there's disagreement still within the party about which direction to go. And I think that's why we need some new people in Springfield, frankly. And we need new people running for statewide office. I mean, remember, people forget this because I understand, you want to forget some of these election cycles, but for most of the first decade of this century, every time there was an opening for an important statewide office, who was the Republican Party trying to get to run? Jim Edgar. I mean, it was like, oh, the Senate's open. Can Jim Edgar run for that? Well, the governor's open. Can Jim Edgar run for that? Maybe he can run for both. I mean, it showed that there was no idea, there was no game plan to turn the page and usher in a new generation of leadership. By contrast, what do the Democrats do? You got Mike and you got Lisa. You got Tom Hines, you got Dan Hines. I mean, you got, bad example, but you got John Stroger and Todd Stroger. They're always looking, usually within the family, for somebody to follow in their footsteps or for somebody to plug into an opening. And we want to recycle the same old people. Some people you want in office, some people you don't. But regardless, at some point you have got to turn the page and say it is time for a new generation of leadership in this party, in this state, to step up.
Well, one more question, and then if you want, we can go and extend the Q&A time, but I'm going to try to hold us to the clock.
Sure.
And that way, if people want to leave, they can. I mean, people know me, I can stand around and talk this stuff all day. And I'm probably you too.
Sure.
In fact, I think you get paid for sitting around talking about this all day.
Yes.
John.
Yeah. Dan, our country is, if you control the children, control the direction of it's like the udder of the ship, control where the country's going. So, worldviews are very important. We have, the fish, we're fish, we don't even know we're wet. Our worldview has gone from Christian consensus, 1700s, early 1800s, to basically secular humanist consensus. So we've lost the internal government. We're looking to external government. if you don't have the internal government taught from the children, they're going to be the next leaders of the country. Thought forms are going to be perverse, So, is there a way to turn the tide? Public education has been taken over since the 1830s by universalist Unitarians. Rousseau was the man, French philosopher, who designed the public school system. A perverse man. Is there a way to influence schools, because it's the children as our future?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, to me, my number one issue is not, I want to repeal the Quinn tax hike, I want to reform workers' comp, I want to reduce regulations on job creators, and all those things. But to me, the big issue has been and continues to be K-12 education, or pre-K-12 education, really. And it is an abysmal failure in the state, not just in terms of reading, writing, and critical thinking, but in terms of values, as you say. Now, education is first a family matter, then a local matter, and to some extent a state matter based on our funding mechanism. But what I would say is that if you want to change any system, you change how the money flows and who gets to make spending decisions. So at the K through 12 level, I think we need school choice, and I think we need it statewide. I mean, I'll start in Chicago. So we'll start where the sucking chest wound is, and then go from there, or however it's required to kind of move that flag forward, like other states have. But you have got to break the control of the schools away from the teachers' unions, and then you have parents who have the resources to make choice, the same choices that Rahm Emanuel gets to make for his children because he has the resources, the same choices that Barack Obama gets to make for his children because he has resources. One of the great opportunities from a specific policy perspective, specific policy choice, in my view, is for the Republican Party to be the party for freeing low to middle income families, largely in urban areas, even mid-sized urban areas like Rockford and Peoria and Decatur, from the discrimination against them based on their address and their household income. Because that's really what the school systems are. They discriminate based on your address and your household income and relegate you to schools that we know are largely going to fail to produce educated children. Children that are prepared for college and beyond. Children that are prepared to be productive members of society. So to me, that is the seminal issue for the state. I think the Republican Party should speak more forcefully about it, with one voice on it. We even have some Democrats like James Meeks who introduced the school choice bill in Chicago last session or the session before. We got a lot of Republican support in the House. We got a lot of Republican support in the Senate. We got some good support in the House. We needed more. But to me, that's an issue that isn't talked enough about because there's still a lot of Republicans that are afraid to take on the teachers' unions, and that has to change too.
A lot of us do. I've got to run, but I just want to say thank you for being here, and especially the issue about being proactive. One of my frustrations is a lot of my colleagues, they always vote right, but they're not proactive in doing the things that you're talking about. And the winds are changing. I mean, this last cycle, we're electing a lot more conservative, proactive, fiscally conservative, pro-family elected officials. So progress is being made, and that's because of people like you speaking out in organizations like this. So I just want to thank you for being such a good voice of reason on the radio and for everyone's involvement. But we've got to get up and do some walking. So thank you all for allowing us to join you today as well.
Thanks,
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're going to be able to hang around?
Yeah, I'll hang.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So much for being here.